I loved doing the last interview.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too. I guess it was about a year ago now, our last one.
and the thing was, it seemed to go so quickly, even though it was quite a long interview, the time just went, and I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate the questions you asked and your interview skills. So thanks for
Yeah, it
asking
was
me.
amazing. No, absolutely. Welcome back. And hey, everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am GILLIANBERRY, and today we have an incredible return guest. We have a legend. We have Anne Osborne. She has been eating only fruit for over 30 years. Well, mostly only fruit. She is a fruitarian, and she has one of the most popular videos on my YouTube channel. You guys love her. So we're going to get some updates. I have some great questions for her, and you guys do as well. So let's hop right into it. Hey, Anne, welcome back. Thank you for coming back on.
Thank you so much for inviting me back on. I really loved the last session. I loved your questions, and the interview just flew past. Even though it was quite a lengthy interview, I was surprised at how long it had been going just because it was so enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. No, I love talking to you. And I have to say, you're just one of the most calm, peaceful people I've had on the channel. Were you always, before we get into everything, were you always this calm and positive and peaceful, or did the fruitarian diet sort of change you in this way?
I think definitely the fruitarian diet helps, and it helps with your emotions and your mental well-being. But I think I was fortunate. My mother was a very gentle soul. She was very non-judgmental. I can't even remember her getting angry. She was just had the most lovely, kind nature. And I think I didn't always appreciate that as a younger child, but growing up, when you go out into the world and you see all the different kinds of people out there, I just realized what a blessing it was to have her as my mother. And so I really do think that my mother's influence on my life really helped sort of set the tone for how I interacted with people and for what I valued as a sort of like good traits in people. Her just demeanor was really, really lovely. And I think her father was very much like that as well, which influenced her. So I think my childhood influenced how I've grown up, but I do think the fruitarian diet really does help with your emotional state, your mental state, and also your endocrine system. For sure, I think that's one of the biggest challenges. When I worked as a massage therapist, what I noticed, so many women were on thyroxine, and there's imbalances in that endocrine system that I think really can, in most cases, be rectified by diet and lifestyle. And so I think the endocrine system, as we know, affects our moods very, very much. So I think it's a combination of my childhood plus my current diet and lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, amazing. I'm glad you had such a positive childhood. That's amazing. One of the biggest blessings you could have. And I know you're a mother, and I believe you raised your kids raw vegan. So I want to talk about that in a little bit. But for anybody who doesn't know, I would love for you just to say like how you got into being a fruitarian for anybody who missed the last video and how it changed your life.
Yes, well, it started when I was 20 and I was at university, and I was
Mhm.
already a vegetarian, but I was aware of certain practices within the dairy industry, within the egg industry, and I was no longer comfortable with those. And it wasn't for any health reasons at all. I thought I was in reasonably good state of health, but I knew ethically for myself, my own personal beliefs, that I needed to give up all animal products and become an ethical vegan. And as I said, I was 20. I thought I was in a reasonable state of health. But the very next day after I gave up animal products, I noticed a big improvement in my health. I was at university and I lived at the bottom of a hill, and the campus was on the top of the hill. So every day I'd have to climb up the hill to get to university. And every day I'd have a tightness in my chest and I'd be wheezing. And I didn't really think that much of it. I just thought, oh, that's how it is. But this very next day, after giving up all animal products, I was at the top of the hill and it suddenly hit me. And it was really like a revelation. It really did hit me. I'm at the top of the hill and I'm not wheezing and I've not got that tightness in my chest. And that's never, ever come back ever
Wow.
since. And I made that connection, and it suddenly dawned on me that there is a real connection between how we feel and our health and what we eat. And
Mhm.
although I was vegan for ethical reasons, I was really interested from that point onwards in looking into the health aspects of veganism. And I tried 𝑼𝑺𝑬 sprouts, wheatgrass type of vegan diet. I tried a macrobiotic vegan diet. I tried a whole food vegan diet, and they all worked pretty well, but not that well that I stuck with any one of them for more than about 18 months. And then when I was 24, I was in my hometown of Leicester and I was in the local animal rights group. And we had regular meetings. And at one of our meetings, we invited a fruitarian, and his name was David Shelley. And he gave this talk, and there was just something about him. He had great energy. He looked good. He cycled everywhere. And it was like, we want some of what he's got. Whatever he's doing is working really well for him. So I started out gradually transitioning because I was in the early stages of pregnancy and I didn't want to do anything too drastic that would cause any elimination. And that's how I started. So after about 14 months, I was on a fully fruitarian diet, and it's just stuck with me, and I've stuck with it ever since, just because it ticks all the boxes, ethically, environmentally, health-wise. So yeah, I really feel blessed to have discovered this way of living and that it has worked for me so well.
Yeah, I remember you saying that in the last video, that it's important to you that everything ticks all the boxes. So your health,
Mhm.
environmentally, everything. But what about
Mm.
someone like me, a lot of us who live in North America, where maybe it doesn't tick that environmental box because a lot of the produce we have to eat is shipped in. If you were in Toronto like I am, or in New York, or in some of these places, would you still live this lifestyle, or do you think it's important to make a change and relocate somewhere like you have to Australia?
I think it depends on so many factors. Some people can't relocate because of costs, because of
Mhm.
family, because of jobs. So I think it's not always possible to relocate. I certainly think that relocating has been beneficial in many ways in terms of vitamin D and getting good sunshine all year round, also being able to source local fruits all year round. So it has enhanced certain aspects of the diet. But before I moved to Australia, I lived for 12 years in the UK, and I did rely a lot on imported produce, especially in the winter months and in the spring months. Summer and autumn, there was a lot of local fruit, which was
Mhm.
great. And I think you have to balance that. I think getting imported organic fruit for me, and I was part of a buying group, so it was all organic and very good quality. I think getting imported organic fruit that's been grown naturally without chemicals, balancing that against getting fruit that's chemically
Yeah.
grown was a positive. But yes, it was imported. So there were some negatives there in a way, but I still thrived on the diet in the UK. I had certain strategies to deal with the cold. I often used to exercise more to keep warm, which I found was very, very effective for me personally. And I also used to go away for a couple of months a year to warmer climes where I'd go with a group of friends who were all on the fruit diet. We'd usually wild camp, so we were having a low impact environmentally, and we'd eat local fruits. So that helped. But I do think this diet is possible in any climate if
Mhm.
you have certain strategies in place. And if I had to go back to live in a colder climate for any reason, I would still stick with the diet and look for ethical organic sources of organic fruit that I could make the mainstay of my diet in the colder months.
Yeah, absolutely. I thrive on it in Toronto. It's no issue at all for me. And I feel like my best self, so much energy and my happiest self on it. So I
Mm,
have more to
mm.
offer the world. And okay, so you were talking about the chemicals in fruit. I think that's interesting, or in produce in general, because I did an interview with somebody just before ours right now who did a 21-day grape fast. And she did that and it was incredible. But she noticed she had some neurological problems and some problems when she was in the first half of it eating non-organic grapes. So, do you think that the non-organic fruits and vegetables for those of us who are raw or fruitarian can have a big impact on our health and maybe cause some problems? And it's important to stick to as organic as possible?
I think if you're able to
Mhm.
stick with as much organic as possible is optimal. I've done this diet on a very low income as a single parent in the UK and still was able to source mostly organic produce. I think our mental mindset is very important. If we say to ourselves, I can't afford organic, I can't access organic, we kind of set that in place for it to happen. I think if we really want to, we can. And I can say this because I've done it on an extremely low income in the UK and managed to feed myself and my child on good quality organic produce. And I formed an organic buying group with other people so we could order in bulk. And that really brings the price down and it gives you a greater availability because maybe by yourself you could afford one box. But with 6 people, you can get 6 boxes and have that variety. And I do really think that, especially for some fruits, I would say especially for bananas, which is a staple, I know. Bananas have never really been a staple with me, but I do appreciate a lot of people that on a raw vegan diet, their staple is bananas. And I think that talking to banana farmers, living in banana farming areas, I'm very much aware of the poisons that are put into bananas. And these poisons are systemic. Now, systemic poisons go right into the flesh, right into the cells of the fruit. And you can't get rid of them by peeling the fruit. A lot of people say, well, I peel bananas, so there isn't an issue. But those chemicals go into the banana flesh. And I think with bananas particularly, there are real issues with ingesting those chemicals. And I do not eat non-organic bananas if at all possible. I'll eat non-certified organic if it's not sprayed or if it's locally grown. They haven't used any chemicals. So I think for some like strawberries as well, some of the soft fruits, and there's the dirty dozen list. I think in particular, if you really can't access organic fruit and vegetables, to avoid those ones that are particularly heavy in chemical residues, such as strawberries, such as some of the stone fruits, such as bananas. And I think also apples. Apples in many areas are injected with a chemical to preserve them. And even at the farmers markets, this can happen. And these are toxic chemicals that we really do want to avoid if possible. Another reason for eating organic is that the mineral content is higher. And I went into this a bit in the last video, I think, about how the fungi in the soil has a symbiotic relationship with the trees and allows trees to absorb calcium. And in exchange, the trees pass on carbohydrates to the fungi who can't photosynthesize. And so that's another huge reason for eating organically grown or non-sprayed or foraged fruits, as compared to those where the soil has been killed really with fungicides, with herbicides and pesticides. And that kills the fungi in the soil, which means the soil just isn't as alive. And also it doesn't have the fungi in. So I think it is, for me, it's very, very important because I think we don't really know enough a lot of the times about chemicals being used in food production. For example, DDT was predicted as being this wonderful chemical that would save mankind almost and was perfectly safe. And of course, years later, we realized that DDT was very harmful. And now it is I think it is in every woman's breast milk because it was so widely used. There are traces in every woman's breast milk, which is pretty scary. So I think some chemicals that may be lauded as being wonderful, actually in the future, we'll realize that they're not so wonderful and they have poisoned the planet and plants and ourselves. So yeah, for me, organic is the gold standard, or local non-sprayed. Sometimes local non-sprayed is even better because it's grown locally, no chemicals have been used. Yeah, so the bottom line, eat organic or non-sprayed if possible to avoid potential toxins like glyphosates, which are very, they've been said to be the second most toxic non-radioactive substance on the planet. Yes, they are biodegradable, but so's arsenic. So, really, really very important to go for organic.
Absolutely. And I know you're you know so much, and I know you're so cautious and careful with how you eat, and you take such great care of yourself. So I'm wondering, I can't remember if we talked about this in the last video because it has been a year since we sat down and spoke. But does this extend beyond the food? Are you really careful about what hair products you use, skin products? Do you use any skin products? And people are asking if you do dye your hair or if you do have gray and if you use like a safe coloring product or things like that.
Yeah, I did used to dye my hair, will lighten it really, but then I stopped. I had an appointment. I would get highlights put in my hair, like with a natural bleach. And then I had an appointment, and it was a few days after my father passed. And obviously I didn't want to have my hair, go to the hairdresser to have my hair done. And I didn't want to, like 5 months later, about 6 months later, I was at the stage where I thought maybe I could go to the hairdressers now. I felt like in the kind of mood where I could get my hair done. But I noticed my hair was in much better condition. from not being lightened for those like 6 months. And also the worst of the regrowth had come out. So I'd got through that really sort of daggy looking stage where you've got roots coming out, and just it was thicker and the condition was better. And I just thought, I don't really want to lighten my hair. Even with so-called natural products, it still damages the hair. And I think as well, because I'm out gardening a lot, I'm outside a lot, the combination of sunlight when you've put a product into your hair can be even more damaging. And I do have a few grey hairs, not so many, like underneath it's very dark. I have a few on the top. So what I do is put like a natural plant colour, a natural henna, neutral henna on my hair, and that kind of just golds up a bit where it's grey. But I don't put any chemical dyes on it, and I don't lighten it anymore. And I just have really noticed that, you know, that my hair is in much better condition. And so I don't have any plans. I might put a little bit of neutral henna on just over the little bit on top that's a bit grey. I don't know if you can see, but I don't have too much grey, but just a little bit. With the rest of my body, I do use natural products. I became aware many years ago, I think probably when I was first starting to get into veganism and making that connection between what we put in our bodies and how we feel, I also became very aware of what we put on our bodies and how that can be absorbed. So I started using a lot of 𝑼𝑺𝑬 products when I was first vegan, 𝑼𝑺𝑬 toothpaste. And in terms of putting stuff on my skin, I will just use natural oils. Usually shea butter is very, very good. I find that just the yellow African shea butter, you can put it on the ends of your hair to stop them drying out. You can put it on your skin. It's very low in any kind of toxins. And also what I find, I have quite sensitive eyes. So if I use even natural skin products on my face, often my eyes will start to water, whereas shea butter, I find it's very, very good for the skin, and it doesn't cause my eyes to water or anything like that. So I think, yes, we absorb a lot through our skin. And I remember reading something about how much in weight women eat from their lipstick every year. So I think that's very important as well. We don't want to be eating processed oils and petrochemicals. I discovered a brand a couple of years ago called 𝙎𝘼𝙑, which is all kind of natural lip colors using beetroot and mascaras with avocado in. And I use a lot of their products. I think most of their products are vegan. I'm not sure if 100% of their products are vegan, but all the ones I've used have been vegan. There's also 100% pure. I use some of their products, and you have to be careful again because some aren't vegan and some are. Like one of their mascaras has beeswax in, but the other one is vegan. But I think those two brands are very, very good. And yeah, just using sometimes just olive oil on my skin to moisturize it. Just, I think the simpler, often the fewer ingredients. Like I'm a mono girl in terms of diet. So the vast, vast majority of my diet, I'll have mono meals of fresh fruit. And I think as well, with skincare products, often the fewer ingredients, the better, the simpler, the better. You can look at some of the ingredients on a regular mascara, for example, or a regular face cream. And it's quite scary when you look at that, the huge volume of ingredients. So again, I think simplicity. I think sometimes, you know, we think, oh, all this scientific advancements in, you know, skincare. But I think often just some of the simpler age-old remedies work really, really well.
So true, so true. I agree. And that's also interesting. And I'm wondering, what does a day look like for you currently? What's your daily routine right now? And what are you eating in a day?
Well, my daily routine, I run every other day. So I run 10 kilometers every other day. So on a running day, I'll usually wake up between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. And then the good thing about being on a fruit diet is when I'm awake, I'm awake. When I even cooked vegan, I felt like hungover in the morning. I had to have a cold shower or something to get me going, and, you know, some kind of stimulation. But now I wake up, I'm kind of ready to go. So I'll wake up in the morning. The first thing I do is feed my cat, let him out. And then I might do some computer work. Then as soon as it gets light enough to run, I'll be out, I'll do my run and I'll come back. Then I'll do some watering on the garden. move the hoses around, maybe do a bit of weeding, do some garden work. Then I'll have my breakfast. Usually about 8 o'clock is a good time for breakfast for me, which will be a meal of seasonal local fruit if possible. So at the moment we've got some really good keat mangoes, which are the late season mango, because it's just coming to the end of mango season in Queensland. So this morning I haven't had my breakfast yet, but when I have breakfast I will have a mono meal of mangoes. Then I'll go back to do gardening work, or if I've got some computer work to do, I'll do that. So I'll be out in the yard weeding, planting. I've got a lot of seeds at the moment that are just coming up from all the summer fruits. So I've got all these meringue. So I don't know if you've ever had meringue. It's
I don't think
related
I
to
have.
𝑐𝑠.
No.
Meringue is a wonderful fruit. It's
Wow.
one of my favorite fruits. It's similar to 𝑐𝑠, I would say, but lighter. It's like a marshmallowy, white, fluffy pillow of a fruit.
Wow.
And a really good one tastes almost like 𝑐𝑠 with those layers of sweet candy flavors.
Wow.
And we were fortunate enough to get some good local ones this year. I haven't got a tree growing in the garden, so I saved all the seeds and I planted them, and they're just coming up. So that's the job for me later today, is to transplant some of those little baby seedlings out into
Mhm.
pots, and yeah, when they get a bit bigger, plant them. So having 3 acres is quite a full-time job. So I gave up my job working for the Woodstock Fruit Festival last year because I really needed to work full-time on the land. We're working towards self-sufficiency. My husband works away from home most of the time, so it's kind of me out here on my own, keeping sort of ahead of everything, or trying to keeping ahead of the weeds, which when you're living in the subtropics and you've got sunshine and you've got rain, going away for a week and you come back and it's like, wow, I've got a lot to catch up on. And also something that I got recently was a push mower, which works on fruit power. So it doesn't work with any kind of gas or
Yeah.
any petrol in it. It's push, and we've got quite a bit of grass. But I thought, well, this is fantastic because it's so quiet. What I don't really like about petrol mowers or ride-on mowers is they're so noisy. They're
Mhm.
dusty. They run on gas. And if you go over a stick or a stone, they're really quite jarring, I find. Whereas a push mower, you can mow any time of the day. You're not going to upset the neighbors. And it's just very quiet, and it's great exercise. It's great upper body and glute exercise, pushing this mower, because there's a resistance in that, especially if the
Mhm.
grass is a bit longer. So I'm really excited to have just got this mower and
Amazing.
realized that I can keep the grass down while my husband's away, because he'll use the ride-on mower. But I really like hand tools in general. Like I'll
Yeah.
use a hand drill. I don't use a lot of electric tools or gas tools or things like that. So that is taking up a bit of my day as well, keeping the lawn down with a push mower. So then I'll have a sort of midday meal, and that could be avocado. If I'm feeling
Mhm.
like a denser, more savory meal, I'll have a mono meal of avocados, which is usually avocados, two medium-sized avocados, or if they're very small, it might be 3
Mhm.
smaller avocados. Or if I don't feel like avocados, I don't always eat avocados, but when avocado season is on, the local ones here, they grow a lot of avocados and they are delicious. I definitely have eaten more avocados since I've moved to Australia. I'll have a different type of local seasonal fruit. So I might have 𝑚𝑠𝑐𝑫𝑬. They're still in season here at the moment. Or I might have some papaya, and we're growing our own papaya. So I might have a meal of homegrown papaya, or any juicy fruit that I've got in. Persimmons are just coming in here. So I've got quite a few persimmons. They're the no, they're the astringent ones. Yeah.
Mm.
So they have to ripen really fully before you can eat them. I prefer the flavor in general of the astringent ones. So I've got a lot of those just waiting, local ones grown organically just down the road, waiting for those to ripen. So that could be my midday meal. Then in the afternoon, I might go into town, which is a big walk. It's a 14K walk. So I might go in early afternoon, do my shopping, get the school bus home again to get some supplies, or I might do more yard work, more computer work. And then my sort of later meal will be another juicy fruit meal. If I've not had avocados, it could be an avocado meal. So it's very, very simple.
Wow.
Just mono meals as much as I care for of fruit. And I definitely have found that the longer I've been on the diet, I need to eat less. I seem to assimilate more from the fruit, but at the beginning I needed to eat a lot. So I think there's no set amount for any one person. It really does vary. And at the beginning of your journey, you may well need to eat more until your digestive system adjusts to the diet. Or you may always need to eat more. There's no wrong or right, because people often ask, how much do you eat? I eat as much as I care for. Usually it could be 2 mangoes. But if I was very hungry, been very physically active, it might be 3 mangoes. But I will eat as much as I care for. And I think with juicy fruit, you don't really need to limit how much you eat, because you will feel full before you can't really. I think it's very hard to overeat on juicy fruit if you listen to your body and you don't eat more than you feel comfortable with. And I go to bed fairly early. So in the evenings, I might read, wind down. If my husband's home, I cook him vegan dinners. So if he's home, I'll cook him a meal. So he'll sit down and have his dinner, and I'll have some fruit. Or maybe I won't eat because I feel better not eating so late in the day. So usually if I'm on my own, I'll finish eating about 4 p.m. and then go to bed early between 9 and 10, because I get up between 4 and 5, and always feel nicely tired at the end of the day, because I've usually been pretty physically active. So every other day I'll run 10K. And then even when I'm not running, I'll be mowing or lugging hoses around or digging or planting. So I think working on the land is functional exercise in itself. And yeah, I just feel so blessed to have arrived at this place in my life where I'm living in a beautiful property with a beautiful climate, with enough land to be self-sufficient, and working towards that. We're definitely not there yet, but we are working towards it, and planting lots of fruit trees, growing lots of fruit seeds. So that's kind of my usual day. Yeah.
That's amazing. Congratulations. And that's a dream to be self-sufficient like that. I think it's amazing. And I'm wondering, okay, so a couple things with all that avocado, you don't feel like it makes you tired and feel too weighed down. It still gives you lots of energy.
Yeah, I don't find, for me personally, it weighs me down having avocado. I notice the days that I don't have avocado, my running times are pretty much similar. I know some people say that they don't do so well the day after exercising if they have avocado. I think as long as I'm eating sort of like, for my needs, and not overeating, not undereating, it doesn't seem to matter to me really whether I'm including avocado in my diet or if I'm not. And I do think that women sometimes need more fat than men. And I think there's sometimes in your life or in your cycle, if you're still having your monthly cycle, when you do need more fat. And I think because I eat avocado in a mono meal, it's hard to overeat it. I think you can, but there is that stop point. And I think if I have more than 2 or 3 small avocados, I think that wouldn't be optimal for me. But I think having that amount and being quite physically active, it doesn't seem to slow me down. I don't seem to get mucus, not that I notice. But then there's other times when I don't have avocado and I feel great as well. I think I feel most optimal on a mono diet, which doesn't include avocado, because I don't think I would want to do a mono diet of avocado. I think that is kind of one step up. Doing a mono diet always for me is like a real, I don't know, it's just a simplicity of life. And it's just, I don't know, that's not much digestive energy. And I always just feel so happy and bright doing a mono diet. But other than that, including avocado or not including avocado, I don't really notice much difference in my energy levels, my
Yeah.
running times, that kind of thing. But I think everybody's individual. Some people don't do so well with avocado and do feel better not including it. And I think that's something to try for yourself. Don't always take somebody else's word for it. Try it for yourself. And if you find that it slows you down, you don't feel as good, then you don't maybe need to eat avocado. If you find that it doesn't seem to make a difference, or you actually feel better with it, then maybe there's a need to include it. I think when we start having hard and fast rules, some people can fall through the net, because we all do have really, the more I I do this diet, the more I learn, I realize how individual our needs are and how important it is to honor those individual needs and not say to someone, oh, that's wrong what you're doing, because it might not be wrong for that person. It might not work well for you. And especially with assimilation, realizing that assimilation rather than calories is the key. And I think we talked about this last time, that a person that has a damaged intestinal system, that has damaged villi, which are the little absorption projections in your intestines, will maybe always need to eat more calories because they're not assimilating so much. I'm surprised that nobody has really addressed that it's not just calories going in, it's what we absorb. If somebody has a damaged digestive system due to taking a lot of recreational allopathic drugs in the past, or due to Crohn's disease, or any kind of other digestive system issues, they may always need to eat more because they're not assimilating so much. Whereas another person taking their advice may put on a huge amount of weight because they've actually got a better functioning digestive system and they may be assimilating so much more. So it really is, I think, trying things. Having a transitional period is a great period of opportunity to try what works, what doesn't, what percentage of raw. And I would never say 100% is best for everybody. It works best for me because I tried it in the transitional period. But some people do really, really well on, say, 80% raw, because what they find is if they have that 20% cooked, or say 90% raw, 10% cooked, that amount of cooked food helps them keep to the vast high raw diet. So the vast majority of their diet is raw, and it helps them keep to that. Whereas if they try 100% raw, they start getting all these kinds of cravings and then go right off the raw diet. So I think we really need to find what works for us. And I think as well, we need to drop the judgment of what's best and, what's optimal, and look at what works for us, and we can advise people. But I think everybody needs to find that balance with a raw vegan diet, whether it's 100%, whether it's 90%, whether it's 80%. Some people find that 80% doesn't work for them because they just go higher and higher in the percentage of cooked food. And so 100% is the way to go, but it's not necessarily the way for everyone. And I think we need to find the way that keeps us on track for our best living, our best health. Yeah.
Yeah, the way that keeps us on track and doesn't keep us like flip-flopping and things like that.
Mm.
And I love that
Yeah.
about you. I love how you're not dogmatic and not judgmental, and you think everyone has to follow the path that's right for them. And okay, it's interesting to me. So your partner, you cook food for as well. This is a common question people have on my channel. They say, oh, my partner doesn't eat the same way as me, whether they eat cooked vegan and that person eats raw, or whether it's not vegan or a different lifestyle. Do you have any tips for people out there who have different lifestyles in their households? And do you ever get tempted by those foods? I'm guessing not. After 30 years fruitarian, I'm guessing you don't get tempted by the cooked foods. But if you have any advice for anybody who does, or how to just stay on track with their lifestyle when they're in a household of people who eat a different lifestyle.
Yeah, I think that can be very challenging for a lot of people. And I think especially at the beginning of your journey, when you're transitioning away from cooked food and there's other members of the household that are eating cooked. I do know some people that won't cook food, and other people that will. And I think, again, we've got to look at the situation and the individual and the relationships. I think for some people, if it's going to throw you off course, if you're just starting on this diet and you're finding you're still tempted by certain foods and the smell of certain foods, it may be that somebody else in your household needs to do the cooking for a while, and that you say, that's fine. That's, don't feel bad. Don't feel guilty about saying, look, and communicate effectively with the other people by saying, look, it's really important for my needs to stay raw. And at the moment, by cooking for you, it's very tempting for me. So I would feel a lot better if I didn't cook just at the moment, and give that responsibility to someone else. For myself, I was raw for so long before I started to cook for other family members that it wasn't an issue, because that wasn't my food. I don't see it as my food. And I'm really happy to cook for family members, because if I don't cook for them, what they'll eat is far more processed. it
Mhm.
contains, more ingredients that I don't think are healthy. So I know if I used to cook for my father before he passed, and he would feel better because he was eating a lot more plant foods and a lot less processed foods and better quality organic produce. And so for my family, especially when I cook a meal and it's all organic, all whole foods, I just think I feel blessed to be able to do that, and it doesn't cause me any issues. But I think if you're tempted, then put your own needs as being important. I think a lot of people don't, especially women, and they think, well, I have to cook for my partner, even though it's going to throw me off track. And I think the longer you're on the diet, the less you see cooked food as your food. And I think what's also very important, if you're living in a household where there are people eating differently, is to have lots of good things for you. Have lots of your favorite fruits, have lots of great quality produce, have, your treats, whatever fruits they might be. And if you have, like something that you love that's a bit more expensive, like organic berries or durian, have that occasionally as a treat for you, or have it as often as you can afford, because it's important that your needs are met and you have good things to eat. This diet is, for me, all about abundance. It's all about, I can't think of any cooked food that tastes better than a good 𝑚𝑠𝑶𝑫𝑬 or a durian or a jammy fig. For me, when we get top quality fruits, and they have to be good quality and they're properly ripe, they top anything else. And I think that's very
Mhm.
important. Getting good quality produce that's really, really delicious, really, I think helps with negating cravings for cooked food, because we're fueling our bodies with delicious tasting, wonderful fruits. But yeah, if cooking for other people is going to tempt us, then I think it's fine. It's fine. Women are used to always saying yes to everything, and we're conditioned a lot to, if we say no, to feel guilty. I'm a bad mother. I'm a bad wife if I don't do this. But I think our own needs are so important too. And I think for many people, it's not long term. I think when they get really into the diet, they find that they can cook, and it's not an issue. But if it's tempting you, go out for a walk while other people are eating cooked food, do something else, and put yourself in the best possible position to succeed on this diet.
Yeah.
I
Well
think,
said.
yeah, I think another important thing is respect, to respect other people's diets, even if they don't align with your diet, because I think people can judge people by their diet rather than who they are as a person. And I think it's very important to not fall into that way of judging someone because of what they eat. They may not have made the connections that we have. If we're an ethical vegan, we might think, how can that person still eat animals? But maybe they haven't made that connection. Very few of us have been vegan since birth, or plant-based since birth. So at some time we have eaten animal products. And to judge another person who hasn't made the connection, I think once we make that connection, it's a very strong thing. And maybe that influences and thinks, how can they eat that? How can they do that? But maybe they don't know. Maybe even if they know, it's making a connection. When we really make that connection, as I did before I became vegan, it's very, very strong. And so I think respecting other people, not judging them. That doesn't mean to say you accept certain practices in the animal industry. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you think that's okay, certain practice, but it means the people. You're not judging the people
Yeah.
for what they're eating. And with my husband, when I first met my husband, he ate a regular diet. I never tried to push him into anything. I never judged him. I would never cook animal products for anyone. So I'd always cook vegan for him. I never pushed my beliefs onto him. And at the beginning of 2018, he said, I'm going to go vegetarian for the year, but not for the animals. No, just for health. And I just thought, well, this is interesting. We'll see how it goes. And now he is very, very ethically vegan. He can't even watch a cookery show on television that has, animal products on it. And he came to that himself without being pushed into anything. And my love for him didn't change based on what he was eating. I didn't love him anymore if he was eating plant-based or vegan to when I originally met him, because I loved the person he was. And I really happy that he eats plant-based, he eats vegan now. But I think we can't just judge someone on what they eat and say, well, they're a bad person because they this, or they're a good person because they that. So I think having this mutual respect, and I think if we respect other family members on what they eat, then they'll tend to respect us. But if we judge them, if we try and push them into something, then they will, I think, push back in turn, and they will judge us, and their backs will be, they'll put their back up against the diet and be less likely to be open towards
Exactly.
what we're doing.
I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more. I think it just makes it worse. More often than not, if we judge them, like you said, or say, this isn't the right way and try and push them our way, more often than not, it makes it worse. It makes them want to run the other way and not live the vegan lifestyle. So I just think it was so well said, what you just said. You know what? The sun is shining so much right now, but I don't feel like getting up. So it'll pass in
Yeah.
a minute.
Yeah.
But this is just amazing. So I want to ask, with the fruitarian lifestyle, do you feel like it's important to eat a wide variety of fruit? Because are there different nutrients in rambutans than in dragon fruits than in bananas and apples? Is that important to eat a wide variety? And is that something you do? You switch it up all the time? Or do you think people can still thrive just eating sort of the same staple foods all the time long term?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think overall, over the course of a full year, it is a good idea to eat a variety of fruits, because naturally there is a season to each fruit. So if we're eating with the seasons, we will change our diet. And I think it
Mhm.
is good, because that will help to ensure that we get a wide variety of nutrients. I think even doing a mono diet, it's important to eat fruit grown in different areas, because different soils have different levels of certain types of mineral. So if we're, say, on an orange juice mono diet and we're eating all oranges from one grower, say their soil is deficient in copper and selenium, we might then get deficiencies in our diet. But if we're eating from 2 or 3 different growers in different areas, we're more likely to get our mineral needs met. So I think there's 2 things going on: a wide variety of fruits, and if possible, fruits from different areas, because different areas have different amounts of different types of nutrients in the soil. But having said that, I think that it's fine to do mono diets for several months of the year in total, as long as over the course of the year you have different types and different varieties of fruits. Because yes, some fruits are naturally higher in certain vitamins and minerals than other types of fruit. But for me, quality is always the bottom line. I would rather have just 3 or 4 types of fruit a year if those fruits are of outstanding quality grown in good soils, than have 20 or 30 varieties of fruits if those fruits are grown in
Mhm.
poor soils. Always, for me, the bottom line is quality. If I can get a variety of quality fruits, yes, that's optimal. But I would rather just have 4 or 5 different varieties of fruit that I know are good quality. So I think there's different levels. Optimal is to get a variety of really good quality fruits grown in different areas. But if you can't get the variety but can get good quality and
Yeah.
have fewer varieties, then that would trump for me more varieties of a poorer quality. And if you're doing a mono diet, to try and get fruits grown in different areas. Because we're working towards self-sufficiency, I would still like to get some fruits from different areas. So if we were fully self-sufficient, and even with building up our soils and putting rock dust in, composting, putting seaweed onto the soil, which we're in the process of doing, still, I would like to go out foraging in different areas and even doing fruit exchange with people with different soil types. I think that is a good way to help ensure we're getting our nutrient levels met and our mineral needs
Mm.
met. So yeah,
Absolutely. And what do you
mm,
think about when people say all this fruit, it's so much sugar, it's going to spike your blood sugars, give you diabetes and all these things? And I'm just also wondering, I'm curious because I don't know if you know, remember when Ashton Kutcher was training for the movie
yes,
for Steve Jobs? So he
mm,
went to an all fruit
yeah.
diet and then he said he landed in the hospital and he got pancreatitis and had all those problems. So why do you think that is? Why do you think some people respond like that? Do you think it's because they're just going from like standard American to fruit? Or what do you think? What are your thoughts around that? I'm really curious.
I think in general, having good quality whole fruits the fruit is balanced in terms of its mineral to sugar ratio. A couple of exceptions that I try to avoid are seedless watermelons and seedless grapes, unless they're organically grown. I think from my experiences that these fruits have a higher sugar to mineral ratio, and I think they can put our blood sugar a bit out of balance if we eat a lot of seedless watermelon, if it's commercially grown, and also a lot of especially green seedless grapes. They tend to be quite sugary, but I don't think they have the mineral balance. And the whole process of a fruit being sweet is how much it photosynthesizes and how much sugar it stores. The mineral content is to do with under the ground, what the soil is like. So they're not related. We could get a really super sweet fruit that's been left to ripen in the sun on the plant or on the tree, but be low in minerals. Just because something's sweet doesn't necessarily mean it's high in minerals if we look at the science behind it. So I think in general, good quality, especially organic whole fruits, do not spike the blood sugar unless we're overeating, unless we've been told we need a really high amount of calories and we're finding it hard to do that and we're kind of, overeating for ourselves, possibly then. Having been on this diet for over 30 years, one thing that I've noticed really consistently with the diet is good energy levels, not going high, not going low, but being consistent. I don't get that dip. Before I went on a raw diet, I would feel tired every day between 3 and 4 p.m. and feel like I could have a nap. I don't feel like that on fruit. I don't have afternoon naps. I don't feel like I need an afternoon nap. And I always remember like my grandparents always having to have an afternoon nap. And that was the thing that older people did. And I'm thinking, I'm hoping that as I get older, I don't need an afternoon nap. And I think that fruit does give us a sustainable amount of energy. And even if we're having juice, even if I have juice, like orange juice, which I squeeze to leave the fiber in, I still don't get any dips in energy. I still have a good amount of energy. I can work on the garden all day and not need to rest and not feel tired. I think one possibility, some people, if they're having raw fats and quite high fat, so they're having a lot of nuts and seeds, I do think that often high fat and a fruit diet can not necessarily work together. I think, that having too much fat than is optimal could influence insulin spikes. And it's interesting that there have been scientific studies done that show that adding fruit to a sugary cereal actually lowers the insulin spikes. So even though the total sugar content is more once the fruit's been added because of the fruit sugar, when they've measured the insulin spikes and the fat being released into the bloodstream as a result of having the sugary cereal, that it's lower once fruit is added. So I think fruit sugar works very differently. A diabetic person I met once who was doing a fruit diet had to be very careful with measuring her blood sugar levels. And she said that dried fruit was different. Dried fruit would spike it, but in general, and dates, which are really dried as well, but in general, fresh, whole, juicy fruit wouldn't give her those insulin spikes. And I think as well, some people with type 1 diabetes have actually been able to reduce their insulin that they take with moving to a raw vegan diet that's high in fruit. I think that obviously everybody reacts differently. Some people may need a longer transition period. I think with Ashton Kutcher, we don't know all the facts. We don't know what he was doing before. Was he leading a typical Hollywood lifestyle with recreational drugs, with processed foods, with a lot of animal products? We don't know. And to then suddenly switch, did he suddenly switch overnight to a fruit-based diet?
I think so.
What could that have done? I don't think often when there's a problem like that, it's the fruit in itself. It might be that he didn't have that transitional period. If he was taking any kind of allopathic or recreational drugs before he went straight onto a fruit diet, then what kind of elimination could have gone on in his body? I think we can often see people blaming the fruit, but I think we need to know a lot more information about his individual circumstances that caused him to have issues with his pancreas. And I think with any person, you'd need to really look at what they were doing, what was their lifestyle like before, what other things were they doing? Was he still taking some drugs while he was having fruit? Was he, taking any medication or anything like that? I think we don't know the full story. And until we do, I think it's very hard to make a judgment on why he got issues with his pancreas. So, yeah, I would certainly like to know more information about his diet and lifestyle before, and if he was taking anything apart from fruit, any other substances, and yeah, before I could make a judgment on that. I
Yeah.
think that I can't say what I do will work well for everyone. I can't say that an all fruit diet will give stable energy levels and won't spike your insulin. For me, it hasn't. And I think if you do a transitional diet, if you eat good quality whole fruits, in my personal experience, I have not had high levels of blood sugar. I've not had energy highs and lows, and my energy has been very, very sustained on this diet. But yeah, I think people have to find what works for them. Some people do a raw vegan diet and it's a lot higher in vegetables or sprouts, and that works for them. So it really is about finding that balance for yourself. And there are so many other factors to take into consideration: your past health history, your genetics, your current lifestyle. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well said again. And do you consume smoothies? Do you think fruit smoothies are too much for the sugars or no? I consume a lot of fruit smoothies. I don't know.
I don't tend to, because I tend to like mono meals. And I will sometimes, and sometimes like, if we get bananas from the garden and there's a lot ripe at once, I'll freeze bananas and then I will make a smoothie or a type of like nice cream with that. And I will enjoy it. I enjoy smoothies, but in general, I got into this diet through like Arnold Ehret and David Shelley, and both of them were really advocating mono meals of fruit and that simplicity. So I don't think smoothies are an issue. I think if you enjoy smoothies and they're a great part of your diet, then that's fine. For me, I have them very occasionally, usually if I've got excess fruit in the freezer that kind of needs using up. But in general, I just really like a mono meal. That's
Yeah.
really what floats my
That's the
boat.
best.
But
You
yeah,
feel the
I
best that way. And you
yeah,
wake
I
up
feel the
feeling
best.
you feel so alert and well rested when you eat that way. And I know in the
Mm,
last interview you said our body is our best teacher. If we listen, it will tell us what we need. But I know a
mm,
lot of us can feel so disconnected and we can't distinguish like a craving from maybe something we actually need. And there's just so much stimulation everywhere we turn these days with our phones and with just the
mm.
television and just everything everywhere. So, how do you think we can get more connected and really listen to our body, especially if we're having a hard time doing so and connecting, finding out what it needs and what path to take,
Mm.
whether that be with food or with something else?
Yeah. I think with food, again, mono meals could help, because if you're craving something, are you craving it in its mono state? So if you're craving greens in their mono state, I think you probably need greens. If you're craving a certain fruit, if you're craving something quite processed, like an energy bar or a candy bar, then I think that's very different. I think with cravings, our bodies let us know when it's like a mono meal or a mono food that it's really craving. Because in nature, just about every animal eats mono. And I think going back in time, that's how we would have ate. We would have found a mango tree and we would have eaten as many mangoes as we cared to. And then we would have moved on and gone to maybe a papaya plant or a banana plant. So I think when we're craving something that's very complex, it's not really our body letting us know. I think when we're craving a mono food, then I think we can have more faith in our bodies that that is something our body needs. I think as well, meditation's a very good tool for many people. Some people associate all sorts of things with meditation, all types of connotation, but really I think it's just being quiet and peaceful and mindful. And there's many, many different types of meditation. It doesn't have to be one type. It can just be sitting out in nature, closing your eyes and just listening to nature and just trying to clear your head of anything that comes into it. And I think meditation is a really good tool to connect our body with the rest of the universe, because we are, I really believe. And really, since being on a fruit diet, I really feel the connections with nature, with other animals, with plants, with trees. It's not just with other animals. I feel real connection with trees. I get very emotionally attached to certain trees that I've grown from seed, or I've looked after, or I've nurtured back to health. And I think these connections really do start to come alive when we eat a raw vegan diet. I think
Mhm.
it's just, we feel part of a whole, we feel connected. And I think that is something that just comes on with time. But I think, yeah, meditation, switching off your phone, switching down your computer, getting outside if possible, and even wrapping up if it's cold outside, breathing that air, feeling that connection with the rest of this amazing universe can help to guide us to what we need personally. And I do think
Mhm.
our bodies let us know what we need. And sometimes we can even get answers in dreams. Sometimes there can be, that's the way our subconscious can connect. Sometimes people will get answers to things in their dream. But I think with cravings, if you're craving like salted chips or something, that's, that's probably not something your body needs. It's excitotoxins. There are so many chemicals as flavor enhancers in so many foods, and excitotoxins. The more processed a food is, the more excitotoxins. And we can get cravings for them. Also, the bacteria in our gut will cause us to crave things. So if we're
Mhm.
used to eating candy or fried chips, we will have a certain type of gut biome, and those bacteria in our gut will cause us to crave those foods. So we can't always blame ourselves, but they'll be craving those processed foods. When we change our diet, and we can go through this difficult stage where we're sort of omitting a lot of these foods that we get cravings for, but once our gut biome resets, we get different types of gut bacteria. So if we're eating predominantly raw fruits and veggies, our gut biome will be very differently populated. And gradually we'll lose those cravings, because those bacteria that are not particularly helpful bacteria to us, they will go, because they're living on those foods that are processed. When we've got the gut biome full of helpful bacteria, we will be less likely to crave things. But it can be,
Mhm.
that transition period can be tough. So I think when we're craving things, we can shift our focus. That can help. We can shift our focus away from food altogether. Meditate, deep breathe, go for a walk, read a book, self-massage, have a dance. Anything that just breaks the thoughts of food can be helpful, because it can just break that connection. Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely, well said, so true, I completely agree. And I'm wondering, so you have children and you brought your kids up on the lifestyle, right?
Mm,
And they thrived from what I know. I believe they were thriving, so that's
mm,
amazing. And I just want to say, how important do you think it is supplementing, especially in those years? I think it's so crucial and it's so key. I think at minimum for people, especially if they're going to have a baby, to check their blood work. I know people even who
mm,
were supplementing pregnant on vegan diets, even with extra omegas and vitamin D, and they were still deficient. I know like so many nutrients can be taken from our body when we breastfeed or when we're
mm.
pregnant. And I think it's so important to do your due diligence. This is my opinion. Stay on top of it, get your blood work done, and make sure
Yes.
things are covered, like B12, D, DHA, EPA, all these things, right, are very, very, very important. So, did you have those tested when you were breastfeeding or anything? And did you supplement? How important do you think it is? Because I do know some people out there don't supplement at all. And that's how I was when I had my last daughter. And I thought I knew everything. This diet
Mm,
reversed all my chronic health problems and introduced me to who I really was for the first time in my life. So I thought this is the be all end all. Supplements aren't natural. I don't need them. And then after 1 year of breastfeeding, both myself and my daughter were deficient. Thank God she's okay. But it was,
mm.
in my opinion, the biggest mistake of my entire life, the
Yes.
most irresponsible thing I've ever done. And still, if I think about it, it makes me feel sick and want to cry because I feel so bad. So I feel like since I learned that, it just is there's a duty in me to talk about it. I just interviewed Dr. Brooke Goldner. She supplemented her kids and everyone with B12 and D, and they totally thrived on the lifestyle. And I just think it's so important. So that's my piece. I'm just wondering how it went for you because I know everybody's different. Some people say they don't supplement and it still works, but how did it go for you? What supplements did you think were important? And do you take supplements now?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to bring up, because when we're pregnant and when we're breastfeeding, we're not just responsible for our own health, we're responsible for another being. So I did get blood tests with both my pregnancies. My B12 was on the low side, so I supplemented B12. Now, in those days, there wasn't so much awareness of vitamin D as there is now, and also essential fatty acids. So those things weren't tested. Even though had been vegan many years, my vitamin D was never, ever tested when I was pregnant, like 31 years ago and like 19 years ago. So I think, yes, it would have been very useful. I would have really liked to have got my vitamin D levels tested and essential fatty acid levels tested when I was pregnant and when I was breastfeeding. So the main things that they test for is really iron, folic acid, and B12. Now, with folic acid, my folic acid with my first pregnancy was off the scale. I never supplemented folic acid, and folic acid is a really, really important nutrient when pregnant to prevent spina bifida in your baby. So I never supplemented folic acid. It was really, really high with my second pregnancy. With my first one, it was off the charts. And even though I wasn't eating leafy greens, really, because that's, often associated with folic acid, it's also in avocados and it's in oranges. And it's easily destroyed by heat. So when you're eating a raw fruit diet, I would imagine if you're eating a good variety of fruits, and especially including avocados, which are great, I believe, for pregnancy, and citrus, you're likely to have high folic level. But I would also really recommend everybody get their folic acid levels checked when they're pregnant, even if they are raw vegan. And going back, I would get my levels checked again, even though both times they were, like the first time it was just off the charts. They couldn't measure how high it was. So B12 was low, so I supplemented B12 in my pregnancy and in the first few months of breastfeeding. And I would do so again. I would really recommend vitamin D. Now, with my second pregnancy, I was getting a lot of sunshine. I wasn't tested for vitamin D. I wish I had been, but I believe that I was sufficient in vitamin D. And my baby got safe exposure to the sun as well. And he's got very dark skin, my second baby. So he had a bit of natural protection. But even so, you have to be super careful with baby's skin and make sure that they get safe level of exposure, not just baking in the sun or anything like that. You've got to be very, very careful. So I think, yes, to get your levels tested is important. If you're thinking of conceiving, then again, I think it's important to get your bloods done, see if you're low in anything, and supplement if necessary. I don't currently supplement. My B12 levels have always really been in range, but on the low level of range. I haven't experienced any vitamin B12 deficiency. I would like to get my vitamin D levels tested. They don't seem to check that in Australia. And the last time I asked my doctor, he said, "Oh, you've got a suntan. I'm not going to check you," which is a bit silly, really, because you could have a suntan and still be low in vitamin D. So it's something that I probably will get done some point in the near future, just to check my vitamin D levels. But yeah, living in a sunny country, it is very different. Also, there are many countries you can only produce vitamin D for, say, 3 or 4 months a year, especially if you're very far away from the equator. So even if it's sunny, even if you have a tan, you may not necessarily be producing your own vitamin D. So I think, very important to check that. When I'd already had my oldest son, and I knew a family that were raw vegan, and the lady had a pregnancy and she didn't supplement, and her baby was born quite ill. Luckily, a doctor realized what it was and gave her baby a vitamin B12 injection before he got any permanent neurological damage. So I was very aware that there is the potential. So with my second pregnancy, I was very careful to supplement during the pregnancy and in the first few months of breastfeeding to ensure that I had a good level of B12, because I had seen this with my friend and how scared she was, how her diet was very, very good, but it didn't contain vitamin B12. So I would from the, being close to a lady who had this issue with her child, I was very aware, I'm going to be super up on the vitamin B12 if I
Well,
have a
thank God her child was okay.
well, this was my friend's child.
And
Yeah,
her
my
child
friend's
was o
child.
no, but I'm saying
Oh,
thank
my
God
child,
her
yeah,
child
yeah.
was okay.
Yes,
Yeah, thank
yeah, yeah.
God for that.
Mm.
And are your children still are they living this lifestyle now, or have they taken a different course?
They have taken a different course. They were very happy and healthy, both of them. Neither of them got any of the childhood illnesses. They weren't immunized and were very, very healthy. My older son got a natural immunity to chickenpox without ever getting chickenpox because he was tested at a later date to see if he had chickenpox immunity. So I do believe that if children are living a healthy diet and lifestyle, they can get natural immunity to many of their childhood illnesses without actually experiencing them. They come into contact with them, they develop the antibodies, but they never show any symptoms of these illnesses or diseases, which I think is optimal. I think that's the optimal immunity, to get natural immunity as a child from coming into contact with your community where these diseases are going around. So you get a natural immunity, which should last you for life, as most natural immunities do. So they were very healthy and happy kids. They always had plenty of energy. They were calm. They had good energy levels. They didn't cry very much, which was lovely. And yeah, they both thrived on the diet. But I think in both cases, when they were around 14, peer pressure is such a big thing.
Yeah.
Not having any other friends that are living like you do, you don't want to stand out. You want to do what your friends are doing. So when they were 14, they both asked if they could have some cooked vegan food, which I thought they're old enough now to make that decision. And yeah, so I started cooking vegan cooked meals for them,
Mhm.
both when they were around 14 years old. And my younger son is still plant-based. My older son has a mixed diet, and I respect that. I think we're caretakers for children. We do what we think is best for them. Every parent wants their child to be as happy and healthy as possible. And part of that is diet. And we try and give our children the best possible diet to nurture that wellness and health in them. But then we have to let go and we have to think they're
Mhm.
an adult now or they're growing up and they have the right to make certain choices. But yeah, they were both really happy, really healthy kids. And I think a good advert for the diet, because at one talk I did, my younger son, he was only about 4 and he had to sit on this chair for like 3.5 hours while people just talked. I was giving a talk and there was another person giving a talk. And afterwards, this man came up and he said, I'm very impressed by your talk on the fruit diet, but what impresses me more is the behavior of your child just
Wow.
sitting there for 3.5 hours on a chair at 4 years old, when children don't want to be sitting on a chair
No.
for 4 hours, but just he had this like calm energy to do that. But at home he'd be running around and that, but he was able to do that. And yeah, so they were very healthy, very happy, and they still both eat a lot of fruit and they're both really good fruit pickers. They can still pick, there's not many people I would send out to pick my fruit for me, but both my kids for sure.
Amazing.
They've got that.
I love it. And do you think they've ever tried animal products or no?
My older son, yeah, my older son eats animal products.
Yeah.
Not so with my younger son, but yeah. But
Yeah.
again, it's his path. It's
Yeah.
interesting that both of them got more illnesses when they stopped the raw diet. I did
Wow.
notice that. And also both of them, when they're not well, they kind of go back to eating fruit.
Yeah,
So I
interesting.
think
And
they've got that knowledge.
it's interesting what you're saying about not crying and stuff, because I noticed with my firstborn, and she knows this, she's amazing. She would be fine
Mm,
with me saying this, but
mm,
with my firstborn, I was on the standard American diet, pregnancy. The first meal I
mm.
had after her birth in the hospital was a double quarter pounder meal from McDonald's. Like this was and then she literally the first 2 days of her life, she didn't sleep. All she did was cry. I'm eating McDonald's, eating all this crap and wondering, "Why is bacon and eggs? Why is my baby crying?
Mm,
Like, what is going on?"
mm,
I don't know.
mm,
I think there's a correlation because in her
mm,
pregnancy, I did not eat well. I was very stressed out. And she was, like, crying a lot as a baby, as a child. And I don't think it should be that way, you know? We should be able to like, ideally tend to their needs and they're happy and peaceful and only maybe crying
mm,
out if they're hungry or something like that. And then my
mhm,
second, when I ate extremely clean diet, and I was very happy in the pregnancy, then
Mm,
it was like no crying and literally like the happiest human you'd ever meet. So it's
mm,
very interesting. And you know what? I love that you're still supportive, even if one of your children chooses to eat animal products. And I just love all your views about not judging in this video too, and about, you love the person, not that they're doing that,
mm. Yeah, yeah,
And also, okay, on this channel, we love spirituality and we love to get into all that as well, because this path sort of leads you down that naturally. And before
yeah.
I get into the couple of the viewers' questions, if you still have time, I'll ask you a couple of viewers' questions. You okay for time?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
sir.
So I just love stories of alchemy lately. So I don't know if anything comes to mind before we get into the viewers' questions, because I know a lot of people who go to this diet, maybe they have some health problems or some
Mm,
emotional problems or some toxic relationships or things like that. And this lifestyle can obviously a lot of times help that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of we love the alchemy stories here. So if there's
mm.
anything that comes to mind, we would love to hear it in your life where maybe you went through hard times and that hard time turned out to be a blessing, and you were able to turn that into alchemy and turn that into gold. And you can look back and say that was a good thing, even though it was the hard times. Because I feel like these stories can help people out there watching who are currently going through hard times. And when they're happening, it's hard to see that maybe this is pushing me to a better path or this is meant to be. And oftentimes, people's stories of those bad times turning into good can be really hopeful and bring us hope and things like that. So, if there is any story that comes to mind, we would love to hear it. And if there's not as well, oh my goodness, you don't have to share, of course. And I'll get the questions
Yeah,
ready as well.
yeah, certainly. Yeah, there is. There was one period in my life, and I'd been probably 11 to 12 years, I'd been on a fruitarian diet. And there was a period, my mother, who I've mentioned, who was just the loveliest person, the kindest person I've ever met. And she had just passed away. And right at the time that she had passed away, I found out that the person that was my partner had cheated on me. And so both these things happening together was so hard. I think it was probably the hardest emotional time in my life. I was so devastated. And I just felt very, very fragile inside. I felt so fragile and like I was just going to burst out crying at anything. And it was so, so hard. And I had to kind of put on a certain kind of face for my eldest son. And I remember going to his carol concert at Christmas. And I'm always emotional anyway at carol concerts when children are singing, but I just had to hold, I just felt I'm really holding this together. And it was so, I just remember it being particularly difficult. And there were so many times that I thought I could just go out for a drink. I could drink alcohol. I could eat cooked food. It would numb it. It would numb it. It would take away this real pain. It was really raw pain. There's nothing to numb it. And I thought, why, my whole life had just seemed to crumble, all my plans, everything. Why don't I just go out and eat some cooked food? Why don't I just drink some alcohol? And I didn't. I don't know. There was some inner thing in me that said, don't. And I would go out running. I would run, even though I didn't really want to. I would run 2 or 3 times a week. I kept to my fruit diet. I ate simple mono meals. And even though I was just inside, and people say, "Oh, you look well," and I think, I just feel horrendous. How can I look well? But I was giving my body what it needed in that crisis. And I went through it. And it was hard. And it is hard. And I think if you're going through any emotional crisis, it's really, really difficult when you don't have food security blankets, when you don't numb it with heavy processed foods, when you don't numb it with drugs, when you don't numb it with alcohol. You have to go through it. But it's like it does make you stronger in the end, because if you just numb it, if I'd have just gone out drinking, all that hurt, all that pain would have just retreated inside. And at some point, that's going to come out and affect me. But I let it go. I went through it. I let it do its thing and fed my body well and exercised. And I think short term, it was horrendous. Short term, I felt absolutely awful, the worst I've ever felt. But long term, I kind of dealt with it. It's still like if I remember it, it's a hurtful period, but I dealt with it at the time. I didn't numb it down. And I think I did come out stronger. I went through that and I thought, well, I got through it without having to go off my chosen path, without having, not that I judge anybody that would go
Mhm,
off their path,
mhm.
but I got through it without going off what I really want to be doing and what I know for myself to be the best path. And yeah, and so I was kind of, when I came through it, I was very pleased that I'd been able to get through that, because I know that if I hadn't, I would still have had to deal with that pain. That pain wouldn't have gone away just by numbing it with some substance or with a lot of processed foods. So that was a point that I look back and think the fruit diet served me well to help me get through that most difficult period in my life, even though emotionally I had to face it. So yeah, that was a very kind of interesting period for me, a tragic period, because I love my mum so much. And then have the finding out that a partner has been cheating at exactly the same time was just
Wow.
like a double whammy. But yeah,
And
but
are you glad now that do you feel like it was meant to be that that relationship ended and you're glad it's over? Do you look back and think that now? Because I know some people, if they're in a relationship and it's not going so good, sometimes they might have that attachment and they think, oh, I can't imagine my life without this person. So maybe a story like yours, like, do you look back and miss that relationship, or you feel like it was meant to be and you're glad it's over?
I don't miss that relationship at all. And I wouldn't have been able to be in the relationship that I'm now in if I'd stayed in that relationship. So yeah, there were things from that relationship that put me on a certain path. But yeah, I have no regrets. And I think that we need to value ourselves, and we need to think that we're worthy of a person that values us. And I think a lot of people think, for some reason, sometimes things are from deep trauma in our past, that they're not worthy of somebody treating them like they need to be treated, and as a really special and beautiful person. And I think sometimes we put up with things in our relationship. I don't think we should ever have to put up with things. I think we should strive for that relationship. Doesn't mean that we won't have hard times in that relationship, but the bottom line is we know that person always has our back. We trust that person, and that person treats us with love and respect. So I think
Yeah.
that is so important. Yeah.
Well said.
We're all
Well
worthy.
said. You're so amazing. And with your mother, I'm so sorry to hear about her passing. Do you feel like you believe in God? And I know sometimes on this lifestyle, there can be lots of synchronicities and people can feel
Mm,
connected to those loved ones who have passed on, whether it
mm,
be in dreams or signs or things like that.
mm.
And do you believe in God in the afterlife? And have you seen any of those signs? Do you feel like you've connected with her since she passed?
I do believe in God. I'm not in any organized religion, but I very much believe in God, in creation. I just think the world's so amazing, and there are so many wonderful animals and plants that, for me, for that to be a coincidence, I just think there's design in our universe. I believe there's higher forces. When my mother died, when I found out she was dying, that night I had a terrible dream. I think just because I was in shock. But when she passed, I had so many lovely dreams. I've had so many nice dreams. And in every dream, she's been well. And I've been talking to my dad in the dream, saying, Mum's better now, because she had Alzheimer's before she died. But in the dream, she's always like back to her usual self before she got Alzheimer's. And they were always really positive, lovely dreams. So apart from that first initial dream that was really scary, I've had beautiful dreams of my mother since she passed, and a lot shortly after she passed, and they were very comforting. So I kind of felt through the dreams that my mum was all right. She's at peace. She's no longer suffering. And my mum affects me every day. I think about my mum every day, and the lessons that she taught me and the things she did, I try and carry on, because she had such a great sense of humor as well. She was very, very clever, very funny. And I like to think of the things she says, the little sayings. So she's always there with me. And I do believe in synchronicity. I feel that when we're on our path, and I'm not saying everybody's on the same path, when we're on the path that we're happy with and that we would like to be on, we get synchronicities. And it's almost like the universe is saying, hey, what you're doing, you're on the right path. And things seem to flow. Everything works out well. We meet the right people. We read the right books. Things just work out. And I think when they don't work out, we can kind of think, well, what am I doing that's not quite right? What can I look at? What can I go and change? And for me, I've had the most wonderful synchronicities on mono diets, when I've been on mono diets. And I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but when I was on a mono melon diet, and I was with my older son when he was young, and we were
Yeah.
camping, and every morning we would get up early and we would walk up to the beach through the campsite. And we were backpacking, so I couldn't take much with us. The only like toy I'd taken was a book. And it was a book all about these children and how they had looked after this swan, and they had released him in the spring when the swan was well. And it was such a beautiful book. And we read it and read it and read it because that was the only like toy or book we had with us. And then one morning, it was early morning, no one else was really up. We were walking across the grass to go to the beach. And for some reason, I suddenly stopped. I have no idea why I stopped. I didn't need to stop. And I looked down at my feet, and in the grass at my feet was a little glass swan. And I was thinking, oh my goodness. And why I had stopped there, why I had looked down, and I picked it up and I kept that swan ever since. That little swan is very precious. And I just think this is a sign. This is a sign that my life is in flow at the moment.
Wow.
And I think, yeah, we do get those beautiful signs. And if we feel like we're out of flow, then it gives us a chance to reflect and think, well, what do I need to change? What's happening in my life? What are my own thoughts? Maybe am I having negative thoughts? Am I having frustrations? Am I having ineffective relationships with someone? What do I need to change within myself so that I can get back into that flow? Yeah.
I love it. I
Not
could
mm, not blaming other people as well, I think. Taking personal responsibility. If something's not in flow, think, well, that's not working because of that person or that person, or it's that person's fault, or it's this fault. Thinking, well, what other people do and say is out of my control, but what I think and do is in my control. So changing how we're thinking, how we're looking at things, and taking personal responsibility and getting back into the flow.
I think it's so important. Wow, I could talk about this all day. I love it. I love that topic. Well, I'll ask you a couple of the viewers' questions. Somebody was asking if a nursing mother eats meat, dairy, animal products, and nurses the baby for 2 years or so, wouldn't that create a meat and dairy microbiome in the child? I know she is supportive of extended nursing and child-led weaning, which is great. And I think Dr. Robert Morris recommends early weaning. They said 6 months and under, and getting baby on the fruits. Yeah, you did long breastfeeding, right? I still breastfeed my 4-year-old before bed. I'm waiting
Mm,
for her to self wean. So
yes.
far, it's not
Yeah.
happening, but
Yeah. Well, I think that's brilliant. I personally think there is things in our breast milk that there isn't in fruit and that children need. And if we look at countries where they breastfeed long term and or animals are not domesticated for their milk traditionally, many of those people, when they become 4, they become lactose intolerant. And that to me indicates that around about 4 is an ideal age when weaning starts, around about that age.
mhm,
And I really do think, and I've seen children brought up on a fruit-based diet fail to thrive because they're not given sufficient breast milk or they're not fed long enough. So I would very much not be in alignment with early weaning for children. I really do think they need breast milk. I think breast milk is amazing. It changes. So the breast milk you're feeding your child at 4 will be very different from the breast milk for a 2-month-old baby. And I think that is just a miracle of our human bodies, that we produce the right ratio of fat, carbohydrate, and minerals and in our breast milk that is perfect for the growth of our baby. So if
mm,
our baby's growing more, there's more protein, or there's less fat, or there's more carbohydrate, and those ratios are just perfect for the exact stage that our child is at, which is to me remarkable. So I don't feel in alignment. I've not met personally healthy raw vegan babies who've been weaned super early. I think it's much more effective to, if you can, to have an extended breastfeeding period. I think if a mother is having meat and dairy, yes, the baby's gut biome will be different, but she's still giving that baby breast milk, which is brilliant. So I think breast milk, feeding a baby breast milk, and if that diet contains animal products but is a pretty healthy diet and doesn't contain a lot of chemicals and a lot of other things like caffeine and tobacco that pass through to the milk, then I think the
mhm.
baby still has the potential to be very healthy. But yes, I would imagine the baby would have a different microbiome to a baby that's being breastfed and the mother's eating a raw vegan diet, for example, or a mother that's eating a processed vegan diet, her baby will have a different gut biome to a raw vegan. So I think, yes, our diet does affect the
Yeah.
babies microbiome. I think breastfeeding, if you can, is so important. And long-term breastfeeding is wonderful. And I think it's one of the best things we can do for our children's long-term health and development. Yeah.
Me too. I agree. And the next question. So somebody said I really want to read her book. I emailed her. I wasn't able to get a hold of her. Is there any way I can have it? I really admire and respect her so much. Do you have a book, right? Is it available on
Yes.
Amazon or how can people get your book? Can I link it below?
I don't have a physical copy of my book because I had a green printer. So one thing I decided, if I was
Mm,
going to produce a book, I wanted to make sure it wasn't being printed in a third world country where people were being exposed to toxins and bad working conditions and unfair wages. So it would have to be printed where I could visit the printer, look at the working conditions, and also where the inks were non-toxic, where the paper was recycled if possible, and where the working conditions were good and the wages
mm,
were fair for the workers. So I was quite particular because I feel that I'm responsible for my book. If I'm selling my book in a physical copy and people are suffering or the planet's suffering as a result of pollution because of the substances used to produce that book, then I'm responsible for that. So I found a really good local printer and then they closed down. I found another really good green printer and they've closed down. So I would like to have my book again in physical copy if I can find a printer that meets my needs. So that is something that I would be looking to moving forward.
mm-hmm.
In the meantime, I have a PDF copy of my book, which I'm happy to send out to anybody that emails me. If anybody has emailed me and it's not got through, sometimes spam happens, and sometimes I don't always check spam and something gets through. Any requests that I receive, I will send out a free PDF copy of my book. So maybe you could link my email
Yeah.
address. I can say it because I don't really have an issue with saying it's fruitbatanne@yahoo.com. And that's Anne with an E. So
Okay.
fruitbatanne@yahoo.com. And I can send you a free PDF copy of my book.
Yeah.
And in the future, if I find a green printer, I'm happy to get my book out in hard copy again. And I
Okay. Great.
will do that.
Well,
Yeah.
that's good that you're so conscious like that. That's amazing. And somebody was asking, what water do you drink and how much? I can't remember if I asked you that in the last one.
Yes, I do drink water, but sometimes in the cooler months, I don't drink water for a few weeks at a time because I'm having, say, a lot of high water fruits, a lot of citrus, a lot of melons, a lot of papaya, and I won't get thirsty. I'm urinating frequently. My urine is a good color. It's not dark. It's not dark in the morning. I think that's another one to check. Your first urine of the day, that I think should be as well be, lightish in color.
Hmm.
So I can maintain my hydration levels well and not feel thirsty when it's cooler. In the summer months, I can drink 1.5 to 2 liters a day if I'm working a lot outside and it gets super hot here and I'm perspiring a lot. And I listen to my thirst reflex. I drink a lot then. I don't want to get dehydrated. I monitor how many times I'm urinating. I look at the color of my urine because it's so important not to get dehydrated. Kidneys don't tend to regenerate in the same way as other bodily organs. Like the liver, for example, can be down to 10% of its function. And if we change our life and our diet around, we can get up to 90% function back from the liver. Kidneys, when they get damaged, don't tend to regenerate in the same way. So we have to be so careful of our kidneys. We can't see if they're dehydrated. So it's always best to try and remain hydrated, to monitor your urine, how often you're urinating, and the color of your urine. I don't think we always need to drink water, although I do in the summer, I will drink a lot of water, or even in the winter, if I'm exercising a lot, not eating so much, I will make sure I keep hydrated, because once our kidneys are damaged, it can be too late. So I'm not of the school that says you have to drink X amount of water every day, because I
Hmm.
know when it's cooler in the winter, I drink less, or sometimes I don't drink any. I'm also not of the school where some people say that water is toxic, you shouldn't drink any water.
Hmm.
I do believe that we sometimes do need to drink water unless we're living in a very, very cold climate all the time and having a lot of super hydrating fruits. So I think we need to listen to our thirst reflex. We also need to be aware that as people get older, their thirst reflex can sometimes diminish and they don't get that same thirst reflex. Older people, especially if they've been on a highly processed diet and they've got health challenges, cannot always get the thirst reflex. So in those cases, it's extra important to monitor our urine and the color of our urine. So yeah, the type of water I drink is usually spring water or pure water that I buy in a box, a big cardboard box, 10 liters, and it is just pure. There's no minerals in it at all. I'll either drink that or I drink mineral water. I feel fine on either of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And the next question they're asking, they're saying if this isn't too sensitive or personal, and if it is, oh my goodness, you don't have to answer it. I can cut it out or whatever. But they're wondering, I think it's a good question though. They're wondering if your children reached their height potential and how their growth was on this lifestyle. And it's interesting. So I interviewed Rick Lambart the other day. He's 93 and he raised his son fully raw vegan from birth. And his son was behind. He said his son was so brilliant too. He went to college when he was 9. And I was like, what? 9? I had to ask 5 times. But he said when he was 9, he looked 6 and he was behind in the growth. And I thought, well, that I would have thought that must have been scary. But he was like, no, I know raw is law. And he was supplementing too, the important, I believe, the B12 and stuff. But he was like, I just knew it was the way. And then it turned out now his son is 6 foot something and ended up taller than him. So I think that's so
Yes.
interesting. So I'm curious, how was it with you? I know for me personally, like my kids aren't raw vegan, but if that was the case and they were looking 3 years behind, I would probably feel scared. But how was your path with that?
Well, yeah, I feel very much in alignment with what the guy you interviewed said, because my children were very healthy, they were very happy, they were very content. And there were lots of other markers. Their growth was different. They weren't on the conventional growth charts. And I had quite an enlightened health visitor with my elder boy, and she said, your son isn't on the conventional health growth charts, but he's on the Asian growth charts, the Asian vegetarian growth charts, which made total sense to me that he would be because his diet was different. Both my children grew slower than their peers, but they caught up and both of them are taller than their fathers.
Wow,
So the
interesting.
fact that they're both taller than their fathers, and my side of the family is all shorties, we're not particularly tall, is interesting. So they both caught up, but they grew slower. And I personally don't think that growing slower is an issue. If all the other markers are being met, if your child is mentally, and it sounds like that guy's child was obviously mentally way
Yeah.
ahead of his peers, but if mentally they're meeting their markers, I would be concerned if my children like weren't meeting the mental and emotional markers they should have been meeting, and also their physical, like that they can grab things or touch things, or they're walking, or the other physical markers. But height alone, I wasn't concerned about. Their wounds healed very quickly. Their skin and teeth and hair was all good.
Good.
They were very content. They had lots of energy. If they weren't getting their nutritional needs met, they wouldn't have energy. They'd both play outside the whole day without tiring, just coming back to eat. And their appetites were good. Their calories, their nutrient intake was sufficient for their ages. Now, my personal belief is that it's not necessarily a bad thing to grow more slowly. 100 years ago, people reached their maximum growth at an average of 25 years old. Now it's 18. Girls had their periods on average when they were about 15, 100 years ago. Now it's 11. Now, when we look at other mammals, the longer a species takes to reach sexual maturity and the longer it takes to reach full adult growth, the longer that species live.
Wow.
And some really, scary stories of children in Puerto Rico getting their periods at 4 years old because they were being fed chicken with all these hormones in. So I
Wow.
don't necessarily think that it's healthier to grow faster, to grow quicker. When we look at the animals that are the longest lived, they're the ones that take the longest to come into sexual maturity and to reach their full height. So the fact that maybe 100 years ago or in the past people grew slower, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think there are far better markers to your child's health than a position or a percentile on a growth chart. I think they have to have good energy. They have to heal well. They have to be, have a good immune system, not keep getting illnesses or sickness, and have any wounds heal quickly, not bruise easily. I think there are far more markers. I was never concerned because I knew my children were healthy. I knew they were getting good nutrition. If they had been unhealthy, if they'd have been crying a lot, if they'd have been not meeting their mental and emotional and other physical markers, yes, I would have had concern and I would have had to reevaluate. But yeah, and the fact that both of them are now taller than their fathers shows
Yeah,
me that
interesting.
they were getting what they needed and they were very healthy and happy children. So I think growing faster isn't always necessarily, a good thing. And sometimes growing slower can be healthy. Yeah.
So fascinating to me. Interesting. Yeah, there's a real correlation now between your story and then Rick's story that I was telling you about.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
agree with you with those indicators, mentally they're there, the energy's there, and even things you brought up like hair. I think the hair really tells a lot about what's going on
Mm,
with their health. So if their hair was good and all
mm,
those things,
mm.
then yeah, wow, so interesting to me. And somebody was asking, can you ask Anne what other lifestyles related to foods she's tried and why she thought frugivore was the better choice with examples? So I don't know how many different lifestyles you tried. I can't remember if you tried carnivore or any other different lifestyles on the path like that.
Well, I wanted to be from about age 14, I wanted to be vegetarian. And my parents weren't sure about it. My mother was brought up in a butcher's shop, so they had reservations. So I waited till I left home. So the day I left home, when I was just on 19 or 18 or 19, I didn't eat meat again. I became vegetarian. So for a year, I was vegetarian before I went vegan. And vegetarian, I really didn't notice any difference in health because I never really liked meat. I always tried to avoid eating meat. The only thing I could really eat was sausages, that was because it didn't look like meat. So I didn't miss it, but I didn't feel any different health wise to when I ate meat. Then, when I became vegan, as I shared, my
Mm,
health improved. I didn't have wheeziness, I didn't have tightness in my chest. And so from that point on, I tried different types of vegan diets. So the first one I tried was like an Anne Wigmore, which was sprouts, wheatgrass. It was raw, but it was a lot of sprouts. And
mhm.
I felt okay on it, but I got to really dislike that raw beanie taste. There's a sort of taste to raw beans, and I didn't enjoy it really. It wasn't really like, it didn't seem to me like a diet that I thought, wow, I'm so excited about having my sprouted
Yeah.
lentils. It was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just didn't get excited. And so I did it. I felt like physically pretty good on it. Was a bit thinner on it, I think, because it was pretty low fat. But yeah, and also all the time to do the sprouts, my oven was full of sprouts and they all had to be rinsed 2 or 3 times a day. And it just seemed to take up a lot of time and for a not very exciting diet for me. But yeah, my health was pretty good on it. And then I read a book called The Cancer Prevention Diet, which was a bit of a life changer for me because it made me realize how we are responsible for our own health and how bad health can actually be helpful because it can show us we need to change something. But it was very much based on macrobiotics. So I was changed to a vegan macrobiotic diet. And I felt pretty good because it cut out a lot of things. It cut out processed foods. I used all organic grains, pulses, vegetables, which I cooked from scratch. And it was very tasty. The food, I enjoyed eating the macrobiotic food. Another thing with macrobiotic diet was eating very slowly. So I ate very slowly, which I think helped my digestion. It was quite high in sodium though, because of
Mhm.
using miso and tamari. And it was the time it took to prep. So I was like, everything was cooked. It was living in England. So there was no fruit or very, very little fruit, maybe an apple once a month or something. It was quite down on fruit unless you lived in the tropics because it was eating in tune with your climate. So it was predominantly cooked. I was a lot younger at the time, so how well I adapted to that could have been that I was younger, but I did feel pretty good on it. And there was a lot of, nutritious food in there, and it missed out a lot of the processed vegan foods. But it was, again, it was the prep time. I would cook 3 meals a day, and I was living in a shared house, and everybody in the house was on the same diet. It would take me hours and hours to prep the food, to cook the food, to clean up afterwards. And so when I tried the fruitarian diet, it was like, I just love the simplicity. I love ordering boxes of organic fruit, delicious, wonderful organic fruits from all around the world, and they taste so good. And all you need to do is break into them, cut into them, eat them as they are. And it was like, that was something that really struck me. And I felt better than any of the other type of vegan diets that I tried. I felt better in the mornings. I felt more alive. I felt more, I don't know, more consistent energy levels, and I was enjoying the food, and there was none of this prep. There was hours a day saved, and that simplicity really struck me. So I felt good on the Anne Wigmore diet. I felt good on the macrobiotic diet. I also tried a whole food vegan diet where I cut out like white flour, white sugar, white bread, white rice. And I felt pretty good on that as well. But I still, in the mornings, I'd feel a little bit hungover, a little bit like it'd take me a while to get going. And with my first pregnancy, I was in transition. So with my first pregnancy, I would eat some like cooked whole plant foods. And I noticed, even though I was 12 and a half years older with my second pregnancy and birth, because I had been on raw diet for like 12 years, my body recovered a lot quicker. That was something I really noticed, the difference between being high raw, whole food, vegan diet, 12 and a half years older, being on a fruitarian diet, my body just recovered after the pregnancy so much quicker. Like my stomach was flat the next day. And I got my partner at the time to take a picture. I said, take a picture, because I can't believe, because with my first pregnancy, my stomach had taken about 2 months to go down, really. And I was saying, look, my stomach's going to be a bit funny after the birth. And then I was like, yes, it was a bit out of condition, but it was flat. And I was like, oh, goodness, I wasn't expecting that, especially being older, but I actually recovered a lot more quickly from the birth, even though I was 12 and a half years older, being on a fruitarian diet as opposed to a high raw whole food vegan diet. So that was different.
Yeah, amazing. And somebody was asking, well, they're saying they love that you're coming back on. I love her. I've enjoyed her book immensely. Can you please ask her, what does fruitarian mean to her? When was the last time she ate a vegetable? What about nuts and seeds? Does she eat those? And does she actually attach herself to the title fruitarian? Or is it just the easiest way to describe the diet?
That's a really good question. Sometimes I do call myself fruitarian because it's easier. Other times I'll think labels can be a bit limiting, and I'll say I eat juicy fruits and avocados, which kind of sums it up, and occasionally vegetables and occasionally nuts and seeds, because I do think, I mean, you can call yourself a fruitarian and eat fish. Some people might. You can call yourself a fruitarian and eat greens, or you can call yourself a fruitarian and eat really what you want, because it's just a label. It's what you're doing that's important. And for me, if somebody calls themselves a fruitarian and eats other things as well, that's up to them, because I don't think that's going to influence someone. If someone wants to eat mainly fruit, they will eat mainly fruit. They won't say, oh, I'm not going to become a fruitarian because someone's calling themselves a fruitarian and they eat nuts and seeds, or they eat this or that. And there was the whole politics thing of people saying, well, fruitarians shouldn't eat this, or they should eat that, and shouldn't drink water, should drink water. And so, yes, sometimes the labels get a little bit, but sometimes I just say I eat fruit and avocados, juicy fruit and avocados, just because that sums up what I do without any of the labels. But I'm also happy to, use the label fruitarian. And to me, it means that eating a diet that's primarily fruit with occasional other things, as opposed to raw vegan, which is eating a wider range of raw vegan foods. So to me, I rarely eat greens, rarely eat vegetables. Sometimes if I'm cooking things for my husband, I'll try a little bit of raw potato, just a little bit, and but yeah, normally it's like, I'm not attracted to it. Occasionally I will eat greens if I get a craving for them. but usually I don't. One time I ate a poisonous mushroom. I was given a poison. I'm normally really, really good with fungi because you have to be. You can't eat mushrooms if you don't know what they are. And I would never eat a mushroom unless I knew what it was. But I was given this mushroom by somebody who said, this is so-and-so and you can eat it. And I should have checked more. It was a false parasol and it looked like very much like an edible mushroom, but it wasn't. And it was horrible. The effects it's also known as a vomiter mushroom. And I vomited about 40 times in 4 hours, which was absolutely horrendous. But when it was out my system, that was it. I didn't get any lasting effects. Thank goodness. After that, I craved greens. I don't normally, and I went in the garden and ate a load of purslane from the garden, which was just growing wild there. And I listened to my body. So I think in that occasion, because of what the mushroom had done to me, it had either depleted something or I needed something from greens. But usually I don't get a craving. If I were, I don't have an issue with eating some greens if I were to get a craving. But usually, apart from like that example, I don't eat greens. I don't eat other vegetables. I eat mono meals of fruit, juicy fruit, and avocados. That's what it means to me, but I'm not going to get beaten up. If someone wants to call themselves a fruitarian and eat jam sandwiches because jams are fruit and wheats are fruit, then I think, that is their decision. And somebody that wants to eat raw fruits as the majority of their diet won't suddenly think, well, I'll eat jam sandwiches if I'm a fruitarian because somebody's doing that and calling themselves a fruitarian. So I think, labels can be limiting. And if I do call myself a fruitarian, I don't care if somebody else calls themselves a fruitarian, does something different to me. That's
absolutely.
their decision. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was asking, is there a fruit that what fruit gives you the most energy?
I think melons are very good for energy because to me, they are very easy to digest. So they almost go straight away into giving you energy. And especially some of the orange fleshed melons and the Galia melons have got good minerals as well. They have good minerals close to the skin. They have a good amount of sodium, which watermelons don't so much. And I've heard people say, oh, you can't get all the energy you need on melons alone. But I did I did 6 months just on melons. And on day 47, I came first out of 4,000 people on a walkathon. And I was just on melons. So I know for me, melons certainly can. And it was quite interesting because I'm not normally competitive. Like I go running, but I just run by myself. And I'm not really, into racing or going on park runs. I just kind of like to do my own thing. But I was on this walkathon because I like walking, and there was triathletes there. There was a lot younger people, and I was just going as fast as I could for myself, just to challenge myself. But then you'd go past the posts, and they'd say, "There's 12 people in front of you. There's 6 people in front of you." And I actually I'm going to go for this. I'm going to go and try and win it, and it was quite fun actually. But and I was on day 47 of just melons. So I think melons are good for energy. I also think mangoes are good. I think persimmons, I think the juicy fruit that's high in natural fruit sugars are really good for sustainable energy. So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, incredible. Okay, well, this has been amazing. I've loved talking to you. I want to thank you again for coming on. And maybe to end off, I'm wondering maybe who are 3 of your favorite people to follow, or influencers or channels? Like what inspires you? Who inspires you? And maybe what is your favorite quote? And if you could let everybody know where they can find you, and I will link that all down below as well.
I think really the people that have influenced me have been like people in the past. David Shelley, who I met at the animal rights meeting and who shared his energy and his knowledge. And meeting him, it was like, this is possible. And this is a really wonderful way to live. I also am influenced really by people, and I don't have any specific channels, but people who spend all their time and energy caring for rescued animals. And they have my respect. So there's many charities. There's the Woodstock Rescue in Australia. There's Farm Animal Rescue. There's Lamb Care Victoria. And these are people who, there's a lady in Scotland, and I can't even think of her channel now, but she has a hospice for dying animals. So imagine how challenging that is, taking in animals that haven't got very long with you And these are people that spend like 24/7 caring for rescued animals. So they're the people that have my greatest respect. Somebody in the raw food movement, really, they're the old timers. Arnold Ehret
Mm.
influenced me immensely, and his works continue to influence me, yeah, hugely. But I think all my current day heroes are animal rescue people, people that go to third world countries and care for orphans, people that care for the vulnerable and sick in society that have fallen through the net because of the way our society tends to value other things rather than caring for those that need caring. And I think my quote would be, treat other people how you'd like to be treated yourself, which is attributed to Jesus. I do love a lot of the things that Jesus said. I'm not into any organized religion, because I think when we treat our neighbor as ourselves, and that includes our animal neighbors and our plant neighbors and every other living entity on the planet, I think when we do that, we can really create like a paradise here on this planet. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love ending off with that. And I just have to say, I've noticed throughout this whole interview, your mind is so sharp because I tend to ask a lot of questions at once. A lot of times I'll ask 3 or 4 questions at once. And many times, like people will be like, what was the other question? What was the other question? And you didn't even say that once. You're very sharp at answering multiple questions. I think that's amazing. So it's definitely working for you. And we love you on this channel. Thank you so much for coming on, Anne.
Thank
And I will
you.
link everything down below where everybody can go follow you or email you to get your book. And I wish you well. I wish you nothing but happiness. I think you're incredible. And to the viewers, I hope you love this. I hope you got some value from it. If you did, give it a big thumbs up right now. And be sure to subscribe if you don't already for more great videos just like this one. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Bye.